finally, what we all have been waiting for and calling for and questioning why it wasn't happening. Stephanie White has stepped up to the plate in defense of Caitlin Clark. I could not believe my ears, guys. I could not believe my ears when I heard this. Stephanie White actually being bold enough to stand on business and protect Caitlin Clark.
There's a moment when someone finally says the quiet part out loud. No anger, no theatrics, just a truth so clear it cuts through the noise. That's what happened when Stephanie White stepped up and drew a hard line around Caitlin Clark. I hate it all for Caitlin. She's a 23-year-old kid who loves to play this game, and she's a pawn in a lot of other people's games. The quote landed like a thunderclap because it wasn't a hot take, it was a diagnosis. A veteran coach reading the vital signs of a league sprinting into the spotlight and somehow tripping over the very star who helped it get there. What made it sting wasn't the volume, it was the precision. White didn't swing at shadows. She identified the pattern everyone could feel, but few would say. Debates that should be about systems, policies, and leadership had been quietly rerouted through one person's name. Instead of tackling rules, revenue, or respect head-on, the conversation kept using Caitlin as the shortcut, and then pretending the detour was the destination. White cut that cord. Calmly. Completely. The power of that sentence doesn't end with sympathy. It carries a standard. It challenges the league to act like it understands the weight of its moment and the limits of one player's shoulders. It asks players, media, and leadership to prove they can tell the difference between leveraging momentum and exploiting a person. Because momentum is fuel, exploitation is friction. One pushes you forward, the other quietly burns your engine. And that's why the quote didn't just echo, it reorganized the room. It forced the cameras to tilt from the center of the stage to the scaffolding around it. It made a simple demand. If you want a bigger stage, build stronger scaffolding. Don't keep balancing the whole structure on a 23-year-old and then wonder why the lights flicker. But that one sentence wasn't the whole story. It was the starting point. It opened the door to the question behind every headline. How did one name become the default setting for every argument?
And it is Stephanie White talking about Caitlin Clark being brought up in a lot of these conversations in CBA by other people and not her speaking herself. And I think this is a really interesting one. And it's clear from this answer, I've already listened to this, it's very clear from this answer that Stephanie White clearly and Caitlin Clark, there's clearly a level of person, like they clearly really like each other as people.
Some names become louder than the game. Caitlin Clark's did. She became the attention engine. Ratings that jump on sight, arenas that sell out on rumor, timelines that spin the moment her name appears. Attention has gravity, and gravity bends everything that enters its field. Salary debates? Her name gets dragged in. Officiating controversies? She's the example. Coverage critiques, TV slots, broadcast tone? She's the litmus test. After a while, you're not talking about structures, incentives, or accountability. You're arguing about a person who didn't write the rulebook and didn't schedule the broadcasts. That's the trap Stephanie White tried to spring. Because once a league starts using a single athlete as the avatar for every unresolved issue, honesty gets replaced by convenience. If a policy is unpopular, it's framed through how it affects Caitlin. If a decision is praised, it's because of Caitlin. If a problem resurfaces, people reach for the same shortcut. Put her name in the middle and hope the conversation ends faster. It does end faster, but it also ends dumber. The real questions go unanswered, and the person in the crosshairs gets treated like a lever instead of a human being. This didn't grow in a vacuum. It grew in a pressure system. New money, new audiences, new expectations, plus old grievances that never fully healed. Add in social media's appetite for names over nuances, and you get a cycle that rewards the most clickable focal point. Every stakeholder learns the same trick. Attach your argument to the brightest star, and it will travel farther, faster. The problem is what gets left behind, the maddening, necessary work of fixing what actually needs fixing. It's also why the discourse started to feel unbalanced. When a rookie's nightly box score becomes a proxy fight over revenue sharing, when a tough foul becomes a referendum on institutional protection, when a post-game quote becomes proof of a conspiracy or a lack of humility, you can feel the center tilt. The story narrows until it can't hold the weight of everything being crammed into it. And when stories collapse, it's never the policy that bruises. It's the person. White pointed at that tilt and said, "Stop." Not because Clark needs a shield from basic scrutiny, but because the league needs a mirror for honest accountability. Talk about salaries without turning one player into the pay scale. Talk about officiating without pretending one whistle defines safety. Talk about media coverage without using one face as the measuring stick for respect. If the WNBA wants durable growth, it has to grow the conversation, not just grow the spotlight. Make no mistake, the spotlight can be a gift. It can fund better travel, expand rosters, and amplify the beauty of the game. But when the spotlight becomes a shortcut for doing the hard work, it burns hotter than it illuminates. That's the difference White was naming. She wasn't dimming the star. She was widening the frame. And that frame has to get bigger fast. Because the tensions fueling this habit, money, power, fairness, voice, aren't fading. They're compounding. Which is why the next part matters even more. When the debates jump from the floor to the front office, what happens to trust? And who, exactly, is responsible for rebuilding it?
Saying what it is, these people are using Caitlin Clark. They're disrespecting. And
the temperature spiked when Nafisa Collier called out leadership, describing private conversations that, to her, revealed something worse than disagreement: disrespect. Alleged remarks about players needing to be grateful for the platform lit the fuse. Kathy Engelbert publicly denied it, saying there were a lot of inaccuracies in what had been attributed to her. The specific wording matters less than what came next: escalating distrust, a canceled meeting, and a widening credibility gap, right as the CBA clock ticked toward October 31st. If you're keeping score, that's the worst time for the league's most important relationship to fray. But Collier wasn't yelling into an empty room. Sophie Cunningham didn't tiptoe. She called Engelbert the most delusional leader our league has seen. Strong words, sure, but also a barometer of where players' heads are as they push for bigger rosters, fairer revenue sharing, fewer handcuffs on off-season work, and a standard of officiating that respects the talent on the floor. Adam Silver himself acknowledged things have gotten too personal. Translation: the house is louder than usual because the stakes are bigger than usual. When the room gets this loud, it's easy to forget who's stuck in the middle of it.
And then Caitlin Clark kind of getting brought into that, Caitlin Clark responding to it. What has been your overall assessment of that dialogue and as it relates to your star player?
Yeah, I mean, I hate it all for Caitlin. I feel like, she's a 23-year-old kid who loves to play this game, who is a pawn in a lot of other people's games and a lot of other people's narratives, and I hate that for her. We're coming into a time in the WNBA where we're kind of part of the growing pains of becoming quote-unquote mainstream professional sport is some of this stuff.
Clark's public tone has been almost boring in the best way. Respectful, brief, non-combustible. She isn't out here torching microphones. She's playing basketball and surviving the centrifuge of attention. Yet her name still gets wedged into every debate like a crowbar. That's the part White couldn't stomach. Treating a human being like a pressure valve for every fight the league doesn't know how to resolve. It's not that Clark is fragile. She's handled a year most veterans couldn't. It's that the load isn't hers to carry alone. And if the league keeps balancing the furniture on one rookie's shoulders, eventually someone snaps. White's point wasn't just protective. It was systemic. Stephanie White's credibility doesn't come from a viral soundbite. It comes from time served. She played when the WNBA was still proving it would exist. She coached before and after the money got real. She's led in different markets, in different eras, and she returned to Indiana with receipts from Connecticut's recent highs. When she calls this turbulence growing pains, that isn't a slogan, it's a map. It says, we've been hungry, we've made progress, and now we're colliding with the costs of success: ego, power, control, fairness. Growing pains doesn't mean get over it. It means grow through it. But growth only happens if leaders act like leaders.
I do think that we are at a pivotal moment in terms of the league's history. And look, I was a part of the very first collective bargaining agreement of the WNBA where we wanted insurance all year long. to now where it is growing and players do deserve more. And leadership needs to reflect where we are as a league, and also understand where we are as a league and where players' perspectives are coming from. And we have coaches on the sidelines, and Becky Hammond and myself, and of course Noah Upland, who was in Seattle, who played in this league.
There's a difference between running a press conference and running a league. PR talks in bullet points. Leadership listens in paragraphs. Players don't want tweets. They want trust. They want officiating that protects, scheduling that respects, travel that doesn't punish, and a bargaining table that doesn't feel like a trapdoor. The W is at the moment every rising league hits, the point where the business gets bigger than the building, and the building either gets renovated or cracks. Right now, the floorboards are creaking. The union wants more than promises, it wants proof. And proof arrives in small ways that add up. A whistle that's consistent, a response that's timely, a policy that treats people like people. Superstars are accelerants. They light up ratings, sell out arenas, and crash streaming apps. But accelerants can also scorch. If everything becomes a referendum on one player, the league's center of gravity warps. Fans burn out on drama. Rivals feel overshadowed. The conversation narrows until it collapses. That's why White's pawn line cut deep. It named the bad habit, using a single athlete as a human shield for disputes that predate her by a decade. It's easier to throw a face on a problem than fix the problem. It's also the fastest way to lose the room. And losing the room is how momentum dies, even when the product on the floor is better than ever. Here's the part no one wants to admit. Everyone can be a little right and still be doing it wrong. The league is bigger. The players do deserve more. The leadership has tough constraints. The media will chase what sells. Fans are impatient. All of it can be true. But the only way out is to stop drafting Caitlin Clark into every argument like she's a walking CBA clause. White's message, under the emotion, is simple. Set the person down. Fix the policies. Hold the mics less and the meetings more. Let the game breathe. Because if the WNBA gets this moment right, salaries, safety, voice, vision, it won't just ride the wave Clark created. It will build an ocean where stars don't drown in their own reflection. And if it gets it wrong, the numbers will look fine, right up until the trust runs out. Stephanie White didn't explode. She didn't throw grenades. She told a hard truth softly, and that's what made it land. She reminded everyone that you don't build a future by turning a person into a policy. You build it by treating people like the point. So here's the only question that matters now. Will the WNBA's leadership match the courage its players have shown before the noise swallows the signal for good?